Welcome to this explainer. Have you ever looked at a breathtaking painting or maybe a truly revolutionary piece of technology and just wondered exactly where does that spark come from? Well, today we're setting out on a fascinating exploration into a deeply complex phenomenon. We're looking at the absolute driving force behind exceptional human accomplishment. It's like a giant puzzle, really. We're going to deconstruct the very concept of genius, figure out what it actually means, and perhaps more importantly, why we are just so incredibly obsessed with it.
So let me just ask you right off the bat, are you a genius? Seriously, if you are, go ahead and raise your hand right now. Good for you. As we're going to see, immense self-confidence is actually a massive hallmark of the trait. But hey, if you didn't raise your hand, don't worry about it. Much like Craig Wright, the Yale professor who originally created the Ivy League course this explainer is based on, most of us are just really passionate outside observers. We aren't busy being geniuses ourselves, which actually gives us the perfect vantage point to step back, analyze, and try to understand how this whole shebang works.
Okay, section 1, the ubiquity of genius. Everywhere you look. Let's dive right into this and explore if true genius actually exists. Because judging purely by how often we throw the word around in everyday parlance, you'd certainly think so.
Let's peel the onion a bit here. It's actually kind of absurd just how ubiquitous this word has become, right? We attach the label genius to absolutely everything. We take our busted phones to the Apple Genius Bar. We buy Genius hamburger toppings, Genius vacuum cleaners, and we literally sign up for Genius credit cards. We even have television shows named Genius Junior. The term has been totally, completely saturated in our daily consumer lives. And it absolutely doesn't stop at products. We apply it endlessly to people across the entire cultural spectrum. Kim Kardashian is frequently called a business genius, while Kanye West has been described as a genius in music. Michael Phelps, a swimming genius. Yo-Yo Ma is a cello genius, and Roger Federer apparently hits genius tennis strokes. We even see it pop up in the political arena all the time. Donald Trump famously declared himself an extremely stable genius. And going one step further, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un has literally dubbed himself the genius of all geniuses. Now, regardless of how you feel about any of these specific figures, this neutrally highlights a profound truth. Our society has an absolute obsession with this concept.
Moving to section 2, why we need geniuses. The psychological utility. Let's transition from pop culture directly into human psychology to understand why our psyche so desperately needs this concept to exist.
To really frame this, think about that famous quote from the French philosopher Voltaire. If God did not exist, it would be necessary to invent him. We can draw a direct parallel here. Even if geniuses didn't actually exist in reality, human beings would literally have to invent them. And we would do this for two very specific, highly functional psychological reasons. So here's the absolutely crucial point. Our first reason for inventing geniuses is simplification. We rely heavily on what historians call the narrative fallacy. Basically, this is when we boil down a massive, messy pile of complex data into one simple, single term. For example, instead of explaining the vast, chaotic, atmospheric data of a massive storm, we just call it Hurricane Katrina. It makes the complexity manageable for our brains. And we do the exact same thing with human history.
This brilliantly illustrates the narrative fallacy in action. Just think about the invention of the light bulb for a second. Millennia ago, nameless glassmakers figured out how to shape glass. In the 18th century, Ben Franklin was evacuating air. In the 19th century, Michael Faraday painstakingly developed a rudimentary generator. And decades later, William Wallace pushed the boundary even further by inventing an arcing light. Every single iteration built upon the sweat and brilliance of the last. Yet we completely ignore all of these incredible compounding historical efforts spanning thousands of years just to say, genius Thomas Edison invented the light bulb. Why? Because it's a clean, simple, and entirely manageable story.
All right, let's move to the second reason we cling to this word and see how this builds. Believing in the concept of genius gives us hope for a savior. It allows us to believe that no matter how dark or how insurmountable things get, someone exceptional is coming to the rescue.
Notice how perfectly our darkest, most terrifying moments map to specific, exceptional figures who we then elevate as our rescuing geniuses. Are we terrified of total darkness? Edison brings the light bulb. Dying of bacterial infections? Fleming rescues us with penicillin. Paralyzed by a global COVID pandemic? Scientists like Doudna and Carrico step in with mRNA technology. We need to believe these exceptional people are out there because they give us the ultimate comfort, hope. But here is the really fascinating catch to all of this.
We actually don't love these geniuses at first. There's a very distinct psychological progression. Step 1. They start out as troublemakers and disruptors. We reject them because they challenge the status quo and, frankly, they cause extra work for the rest of us. But gradually, as their disruptions start to bear fruit, we move to step 2. We accept them as friends and heroes. Eventually, in step 3, we elevate them to the absolute highest status of secular deities, worshiping their contributions to humanity.
You know, Steve Jobs perfectly understood this societal progression. Just listen to this iconic copy from Apple's 1997 Think Different ad. Here's to the crazy ones, the rebels, the misfits, the ones who see things differently. Because the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do. That ad campaign brilliantly highlighted figures who were initially total troublemakers. People like Albert Einstein, Bob Dylan, Martin Luther King Jr., and Mahatma Gandhi, who eventually became our ultimate cultural heroes. Section 3. Is genius a myth? The debate. So if we acknowledge that genius is just a convenient psychological tool we use for simplification and hope, is the extraordinary, exceptional individual actually just a complete illusion? There's a really fundamental debate here. On one side, we have the Marxist view, which basically argues that genius is a total myth, a complete fabrication of a predominantly Western male capitalist society. In this view, genius is merely an intellectual cover used to justify massive inequality of outcome and riches. On the flip side, we have the reality view. This perspective argues that exceptional human accomplishment is very real. It says some people simply contribute vastly more than others, and the resulting unequal outcome is totally justifiable because these specific individuals are the ones driving actual human progress. Now, we aren't taking sides here. Rather, recognizing this friction is essential to understanding the complexity of the concept itself. Section 4. The Hall of Fame. Who gets in? To resolve some of this tension and just have a little intellectual fun, let's play a thought experiment together. We're going to assume that exceptional accomplishment absolutely exists, and we are going to figure out who gets to go into the Genius Hall of Fame. Imagine a grand staircase leading into this Hall of Fame, but there are limited spots. Who gets the number 1 position? Look at how wildly the top 5 changes based purely on who is doing the ranking. If you're a person of color deeply interested in politics and human rights, your top 2 might be Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr., with Mozart sitting all the way at the bottom. But if you were born in Europe with a profound focus on classical music and advanced mathematics, well, Mozart and Einstein easily take those top spots, pushing Gandhi and King to the bottom. The accomplishments haven't changed one bit, only the perspective of the judge has. And that leads us to the ultimate truth of this entire exploration. Genius is not some absolute objective value just floating out there in the universe, waiting to be discovered. It is fundamentally a deeply subjective human construct. We just don't use a universal measuring stick. Instead, each and every one of us defines genius according to a highly specific, highly personal lens. This lens is forged by our unique combination of life experiences, our geographical place and culture, our specific place in time, as well as our race and our gender. I mean, think about it. A genius in 14th century Europe looks vastly different than a genius in 21st century Silicon Valley. We see genius where we value the outcome. Which leaves us with the most important question of all. Since genius is a construct, it means it's entirely up to you to decide what exceptionalism looks like. You have an equal vote in shaping what humanity values. So I really challenge you to examine your own biases, your own background, and your own hopes for the future. If you have an equal vote, who tops your Hall of Fame? Keep that in mind as you look at the world around you. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning everything.